we go. Welcome everyone to Changing of the Hip Hop Guards podcast. I am your host, Uncle E. That is my partner, the journalist Sincere. And today we have the pleasure of having Breez Evahflowin. How you doing, Breez?
Doing good, doing good. Again, thank y'all for having me tonight. It's really good to be
Absolutely.
here.
No
Absolutely.
problem,
Absolutely.
no problem.
You got a new single that kicks off today. We're going to talk about it, The Idiotic. But before we do that, let's do a little history for those who may have forgot, may be new to you. Take us back to where you were born and raised.
Born and raised in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. Um, Grew up here, a fan of hip hop. Used to rhyme, like trying to copy off of Big Daddy Kane when I was a kid in high school, and went to the School of Visual Arts when I was younger, and did some talent shows there, and that's where I started rhyming. And back in the early '90s, I hooked up with this dude, Cassius Clay Mack. And years later, he produced this single called Forsaken. And that was like the first time I had a solo record that somebody pressed up for me. And that was a big deal back then to have a song on vinyl, like, especially for somebody to invest in you. That meant a lot also. And the joint ended up doing pretty good. We got on the Five Deadly Venoms of Brooklyn mixtape, which was a legendary ad. And I'll always be thankful to PF Cutton for adding us on there to that mixtape. And then just released more singles with different labels, with Nervous Records for a little bit, with Detonator Records out of Boston, rocking with like Acrobatic up there. And then just the Stronghold crew in New York City as far as the battle scene. Like a lot of this battle culture you see now like was born out of what we helped develop in that time. And Stronghold was and still is the crew that was like kind of setting the pace back then. And yeah, so it's just been a lot of hip hop for a long time, about 30 years officially this year, professionally, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just thankful to still be at it, still be doing it, still be practicing it, and still love it as much as I do right now.
Right. If we could take it back a little bit, was hip hop your first, as far as MCing, was that your first element? A lot of MCs would say breakdancing, graffiti, DJing even. For Breez Evahflowin, what was your first element as far as getting into the culture?
You know, I tried graffiti, but I wasn't good at it. But I was an artist, right? And so for me, it's kind of funny because for me it was comic books, and comic books kind of built that bridge for me to get more into it. So when I would draw, I would listen to hip hop. But I came up as an artist. Like I went to school for art. I went to LaGuardia High School here in New York for art. And I used to do background art for Marvel and DC comic artists. Like I would draw the buildings and they would draw the cool stuff up front until that hip hop bug bit me. So MCing was the first entry point for me officially. But I always had like a love for like graph and the arts. And my cousin was a graph writer, but I was too scared to go into the tunnels with him when I was a kid.
Smart. What was your creative process earlier on writing? And at what point did you take it serious?
It was, I used to write recaps of the football games we used to play on the weekends. I lived not too far from Central Park on Uptown, and we used to go out to the Great Lawn and we play pickup games out there. This was back in the late '80s, right? And so I would write recaps of how we would like either win or lose. And I would just spit them to my boy over the phone. And it was my man Kevin at the time, and he was like, "Yo, you kind of got something, man. You might want to try to do something with this." And I was like, "All right, cool." But I think now that you mention it, like, and I'm thinking about it, like that's been like the core of everything that I've done musically throughout my career. It's been like capturing moments, right? It's very in the moment. Like even in the battles, like a lot of those punchlines won't live past that year, but in that moment, they're so effective. And I've always been like an in the moment kind of MC since then.
Right. Did you have a mentor earlier on? How were you grooming your skills earlier on?
Cassius Clay Mack, like he was like traditional, taught me traditional song structure. Like I was like 8-bar verses, 16-bar verses. I mean 8-bar hooks, bridges in songs. Like we were doing like really formal song structure. And he gave me a lot of that. And then just the crew that we were around, like my man Alley Cap was another OG from back in the days. He go by North Star nowadays. And he was another one that was like on the side schooling me. And I just like came up with so many ill people around me. Like I had a chance to be like mentored by the Furious Five for a while, like live on air. There was this show called the Mic Check Show here in New York City. And it was a call-in and rhyme show. And it was in 1995. I was about to quit rapping after 3 years trying, right? I was like, oh, this is too hard. I'm done. And my boy was like, yo, they got this show, the Mic Check Show. You should call up and see if you get through. And I was like, I ain't getting through. I'm not calling that. So he calls and he gets on the line. And they're like, all right, hold on. He's like, yo, I got through. And I'm at his crib and I'm like, all right, well, hand me the phone. And so they put it on, and what it is, you can barely hear the beat, right? And you got to try to rhyme and hear the beat without feedback coming through your phone. And if you killed it, they would be like, you did your thing, baby, you did your thing. But if you was whack, they would chant, that was doo-doo. Now this is live on the air on Hot 97, right? Biggest radio show in New York City. And you about to go on with the Furious Five, right? The founders. And I spit for all I had, right? And they said, yo, stay on the line. And they said, yo, they thought you was dope. They want you to come to the studio next week. And me and my boy just started wild. It was like one of those moments in like one of those movies when you're like, the kid hits his dream or whatever, right? We go down to the studio next week. My name's not on the list.
Oh, wow.
So we turn around to go and walk out, and in comes Melly Mel and company, right? And my boy says, yo, this is Breez from the other week. And they were like, oh, and they just brought me upstairs to the studio. And then they kept me as like their new school sidekick. Oh. So anytime like some new school artists would try to get up there and get live, like they'd be like, get him, Breez. And it was like, I would just get busy. But I got to see like Melly Mel craft a verse every single week. He would show up, he'd have his pad with him, sometimes not the pad, but he crafted a new verse every week. And at that stage in his career, to still have that level of discipline and to see that, for a certain point, Grandmaster Caz was up on the show every week. And so I'm over here ciphering with Grandmaster Caz, Melly Mel, Scorpio, Kid Creole. Whoa. Man, like, come on, man. Like, you can't get any more mentorship in this game than that level there, along with some of the other good people that I had a chance to work with throughout my career.
Right.
That's amazing, man. That's I mean, 3 years, almost about to give up, and then you're surrounded by greatness.
Like, yo, I got another funny story. I don't want to take up too much time. I don't know how long we got to rock.
We got all night. It's on you, but we love the stories.
In the spirit of quitting, right? It was 1994 at like the New Music Seminar. There were those big music seminars that used to happen in the city. And there was like a panel for like up and coming artists of how to get on. And on the panel was like Ali Shaheed Muhammad, Ice-T, and like two other people. I forget who it was right now. But they opened up questions for the audience. And I stand up and I'm like, all y'all doing is talking about the problems you have inside. Like, why don't you tell us how to get on? And Ice-T looked at me and said, man, how long you been trying to get on? And I was like, yo, it's been like 2 years already. And he was like, sit your ass down. Yo, I got clowned the whole rest of that seminar. It was
hey, your Ice-T voice was dead on.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I was just thinking the same thing, man. That was exactly like Ice-T. Man. But so let me ask you a question. Being that you were surrounded like by Melly Mel and those guys, was there any ever chance of you doing anything with them?
There was tons of chances, yeah, and things did pop off, right? Like from that, like Freedom Williams from the CNC Music Factory, right? He was putting together a crew, right? Like that was right around the time when Protect Your Neck was like paving the way for everybody to be like, yo, strengthen numbers, let's get together and get it. And so Freedom put together this crew called the Black Knights. And we put out a record called Who's the Black Man on vinyl. And it was like 8 of us on there. And it was just testing the waters to see how it would, how it would resonate with people. And And so we didn't do a follow-up to that, but then we spun off into like a splinter group with some other dudes from that crew and put out another record, all while I was still doing the Hot 97 stuff on the weekends. And so there's just a lot of networking and a lot of attempts, a lot of releases put out there before finally we got to Forsaken, where it was like establishing myself as a solo artist. And then from there, we got the chance to rock with Nervous Records for a couple of records after Forsaken.
Dope. Speaking of dope, was that around the time you met Kenny Dope?
Probably, yeah. Right around that time. He was all in the same venues, all in the same spots. And
right.
That was another great ad right there when we got added to that compilation right there. And that's the thing, like the recognition from the compilation, the features around that time, like, and it was just a real collaborative space then. Not that it's not now, right? Collaboration is just different now. But then it was in-person collaboration. Right. And that's where you would link with all sorts of different people all over the game to put together music and put out music.
And how was that experience working with Kenny Dope? Because I know he's a great, when it comes to producing and just his brain as far as music is
Listen,
insane.
he came and plucked our song. The song was already done. It was already baked, ready, and released. Gotcha. It was just I want to add that.
Oh, okay. Hey, listen, that speaks volumes for you guys.
Listen, that's what I'm saying, man. That's what I'm saying. I appreciated the selection.
Right.
What exactly was Partners in Poetry?
Man, Partners in Poetry was the homies out in Brooklyn. That was around early Breez days when I used to be a part of this group called the Group Home. Well, before the Group Home came out. And we changed our name soon after that. But we used to go to all these seminars together, and my man Caution used to bring me out to Brooklyn to hang out with the crew out there, Partners in Poetry, and we put out a 12-inch vinyl that my man Lloyd recorded in his home studio. And man, that dude was like, and still is to this day, like super crafty with it and finds ways to make it happen. He was one of those dudes. And we used to just rhyme around the block in the corners, but that's what it was back in the days. Like you would go to different neighborhoods and rhyme on the block. Mm-hmm. And then you would travel to somebody else's neighborhood and rhyme on their block, and then travel to somebody else just to go rhyme on the block, not for a crowd, not for a stage, just to be on the block for like 6 or 7 other people, right? But it's just that exchange is what you was doing it for. Like that was like what we did. So Partners in Poetry like grew from that into a vinyl release.
Okay. Wait, before you move on, you say you changed the name of Group Home. Was that on your own, or was that some kind of conflict with Group Home?
It felt like a conflict. I received an ominous call one day and decided that maybe it's time to change the
name. Hey, I get it. Oh man, that's great. That's like that old New York feel.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, our group was breaking up anyway. Like, one of the dudes wanted to go solo, and then we were switching things up. We even had Big Tigger was part of our replacement for my man who went solo for a little minute before he went off to University of Maryland and then started his career from there. But yeah, man, a lot of interesting paths intersecting.
Yeah, that's dope.
So all this is happening, I believe, around 96. Are the labels knocking? Are you doing demos at this time?
It's demos. It's lots of recording. It's lots of shopping of demos, finding creative ways to shop a demo. How many different treats can you stick inside of the box so that people will actually play your demo? Lots of meetings in a lot of offices like Wild Pitch and all these other underground like offices. But it's like, it felt like for me, like I had just missed the crest of the wave. And so every time I'm walking into an office, they're like, we recognize you're dope, but we're not winning right now. And we're trying to figure out how to win. And it's right around that time that Rocket started revising like their strategy, and it was more about like who's been on before that we could put back on to try to like keep our things flowing. And so it was it felt good to get the props, but it felt bad that the business wasn't there. And so we just like continue to put it out independently or work with smaller labels. And that's where we went to work with Detonator Records up in Boston. Well, man, Pete up there was trying to build something. He had Acrobatic as like his flagship artist. And I was just doing the battle scene at that time that was starting to now get like some more notoriety. It was like the Blaze battle, where now the magazines were covering it. And then it was starting to move towards the HBO space and the MTV space soon after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so since I was able to figure out how to do that well, it made it easy to jump on like with these smaller labels to get busy.
You talk about the battle. Now, you just mentioned going from blocks to blocks and rhyming and ciphers and stuff like that and the battle scene. Was there a big difference like with these Yo MTV rap battles and you know stuff that was on that type of a platform? Was there something different about it? Did it still have that same vibe? Did it have a raw vibe to it?
Um,
Or was it
no,
more
it
like
definitely didn't. It definitely didn't. It was more like confined, right? There was parameters. Like the one thing you couldn't curse, like right off the bat, like it's like that's 70% of your battle
right.
vocabulary is gone, right? The things you could talk about and the things you can't now, right? But at the same time, like, you know, we came from the era where a true MC adapts to any circumstance. So no matter what it is, we're all playing under the same parameters. So it still don't matter. Like I still got to prove I'm nicer than you within these parameters. You know, that's it. The
right.
rules changed up a little bit, but we still are playing the same game. We got the same goal. So it levels the playing field essentially.
And the
So
exposure was a lot bigger.
it was definitely a lot bigger, and it
Right.
was interesting to see these different venues like starting to take an interest and giving us that platform, right? Like I think the weirdest one was on the Carson Daly Show
Mm.
um,
I don't
on
remember that one.
NBC. Yeah, that was like, and it was he had some like spitters come in there too. He had myself, Virtuoso from up north, ADM, Scribble Jam Champ. They even tried to get Young Z to do it, but when he came to the studio, he was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not doing this." And just walked out.
Oh,
But I was like, "Yo, I got a record coming out. I got this is
Right.
some good promo right here. I'm gonna get some shows off of this." Yeah, went for it and ended up winning, but it was like weird because it was like one of those one round. You don't really get the reply. There's like 30 seconds, so it's like the time frames are really tight. And Honestly, you're just trying to hope you can land like one or two good punchlines so you can advance if possible.
Gotcha. At this point, I mean, are you trying to pursue a solo career, or are you just trying to do the group thing?
Dang. Honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. That was the problem, right? I didn't really have a lot of direction. I just had a lot of talent.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew I just wanted to keep rapping, whatever it was. But it was like I was just doing all sorts of like spin-off projects and then group projects. But I think the worst thing I did at that time was rap to eat. And you know, sometimes you do a project or you do a song with somebody, and it might not be the best song, it might not be the best project, but they're paying, and I got to eat. Um, and that was tough because the repercussions for that is like you get these releases come out that basically will damage your reputation because of the quality of it.
Mm.
But you know, it's oftentimes artists find themselves in that position when you're just out there trying to do it and trying to make it happen.
Right. Can you take us back to the formulation of the Stronghold crew?
Um, Same concept, strength in numbers, right? But this was in the right before the first internet bubble thing. 88 hip hop was the space, I'm sure y'all know 88 hip hop was like the congregation space down there, and all the ciphers they used to have there, all them stronghold dudes used to be up in there. I remember, and I had wish I had leaned into a little bit more of my business acumen back then, but it's paying off now, so it's good. But I remember printing out flyers and going around, and like basically the flyer said, "Strength in numbers. Let's form a crew. Like who's down?" But I was like that. Like that's how formal I was about things. And then I called a meeting at my spot, and the 5 dudes who showed up was me, Pen, Life, Walls, and Index. And then we just started building about the concept of the hand and the fist and the whole thing with the Stronghold, castle, and the name. It all came out in that first meeting. We were just all super excited. Like it was like a branding session, right? Like we came up with like this really great concept, and it took off, right? Like it really caught fire. You couldn't go into a spot in the city without hearing people shout Stronghold. It was just one of those things that resonated within the rooms, like and was respected because we got busy. Then we just started doing the local shows, the local venues, collaborated on each other's releases. It was like a real iron sharpens iron type of situation, because it was like the first time I was with a crew that wasn't just making music, but we were also jumping into battles together. And a lot of us met battling each other before that. So we had like both layers of that. So if we go into the spot where the battles were, we had a crew with us that was supporting us. So you were already pumped up by your squad that was with you up in the spot. And if we was going into a spot where we were rocking, we had support there also. So it was an awesome support group as well, and fraternity in a lot of ways.
Right. Can you take us back to some of your most memorable ciphers you were part of during this time?
Man, one I think about a lot, especially since PH passed, was like one night after New Eurekan, where we were out there until the sun came up, and it was PH and it was Wise Guy and Penn, and a bunch of people, and we just kept rocking, and it was just so fun. But that cipher stayed really sharp for a long time, which was ill. Another one that was dope that I witnessed, I didn't get to jump into this cipher, but it was Karate Joe battling Eminem out in front of the 88hiphop.com pseudo online studios. And Eminem was like bumming a cigarette from Karate Joe, and he said he had to battle him for it. And M didn't know that Karate Joe was no joke. Karate Joe is like a local legend, right? Nobody outside of New York probably knows who he is, but yo, when he jumped into a cipher, like heads would get shook. Like he was that nasty, but he was so street that he had no time for like the clubs or the venues, anything like that. Like Karate Joe was out in the streets doing his thing. But the ciphers would happen on the street. So when he would pass through, like he'd jump in and get busy. But he gave Eminem something to think about that night. So that was a good one.
Oh wow! Wow, so you got to witness that, huh?
Yeah, it was dope. It was definitely dope. But I already knew it was coming because I've seen him get busy before. The worst experience in the cipher was when Adolf Aguilar destroyed me in Rocksteady. That was embarrassing because heads were battling in the cipher, and he was just bullying everybody. And I thought I was going to stand up for people and stand up to him. Man, I never forget the line too. He said something like, because I had jokes. I always had jokes in my rhymes. Like I always had wit, right? But he just cut through my wit, and he was like, "Fat boy, you think you're funny? You want to see something funny? Drop and give me 20 or something like that." And the whole crowd just erupted, and I was like, "God damn, this thing caught me right there!" Like. But that's how it was. Like, you know, I gave him that, you know, he held serve in that cipher for sure.
Right. Was there any label interest in signing you guys as a collective?
There was, and then probably a few missed opportunities. You know, we wanted to stay self-managed, and we were all very strong personalities. And so whenever an outsider would approach, like there had to be like a unanimous decision before accepting whatever it was. And it just made it hard to, to get some of these things to get off the ground back then.
Right. Right. How did you land over at Rec Records? And was that supposed to materialize to a whole album deal or just a single?
I guess they were feeling us out for it just to see how things would go, right? And if there was more traction behind the releases, then perhaps it would have gone that way. But there was also like a little bit of a weird vibe to the business early on our end also. So we weren't really too enthused about following up either.
At this point, where does the group find itself? Not at,
splintering.
not as
Yeah.
of, not as of today, but back
Yeah,
then.
At that point, yeah, I got you. Splintering off into solo endeavors, and finding like different ways to get stuff out or different collaborative paths. Some people even like pursuing like other interests altogether. But a lot of it's still rooted in that kind of like DIY mentality, the independent mindset.
Right. And like I said again, that was 97. Take us to the 1999 Blaze rap battle.
Um, the first battle happened, right? And I was there, and Pre won that one hands down, right? Um, and I was backstage and I was shooting my mouth off. Like, why the hell am I not on this? I would have served everybody up in here. But that's how we used to do. Like, we used to literally like with Stronghold, we used to walk through Times Square screaming, like, who want a battle? Yo, who want to? We were those MCs, right? So when I was in the backstage of Blaze, I was that MC. Like, I would have ripped through all this shit over here. Why the fuck was I in this? And I was like, that dude said, and they were like, okay, fine, Big Mouth will put you in the next one. And sure enough, when they had the next one, I was like in there, and I was backstage quiet as fuck because I was like, I'm trying to conserve and focus because there's some heavy hitters up in this room.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's up?
take us back to some of those battles. Who'd you have to go through to become champion?
Craziest is Dice Raw in the first round, right?
Mm.
And it was a squeaker too, because I went with some writtens that were like, and I got love, and it was the crowd meter. It was a crowd meter thing, right? But I edged him out on the crowd meter, but that still was like dope, right? Like, got to Dice Raw in the first round. And then I was watching the other contenders, and the one I did not want to battle was Proof. I wanted no parts of Proof. I saw Proof in the first round, like just I don't even remember who that person was. They may not exist. He might have destroyed them in that round, right? He was that good. But it was like next round after that was Pumpkinhead. And that was tough because this is a motherfucker I respected, memorized, dynamic, right? Like, and he's nice, like hands down, like he's one of the nicest, right? So we go at it. And it was another one of those squeakers, right? Where I tried to pull some freestyle out to just edge out like his lyricism, which is like insane. And we ended up like split tie on the sound meter. And Dougie Fresh is like hosting, and he's like, you gotta go another round. And so we do a third round. And I think I stole like my last bar from like a battle I'd heard 5 years earlier, or interpolated it from something else. I know I did some unethical MC in the MC rule book, but I got past. Whatever it was, it worked, and I got past that round. And the next round was against I forget who it was, but it was a female MC, and I observed Proof lose to her by going too hard.
Mm.
He out-rhymed her, legit, right? But he went too hard, and it worked against him. The crowd went against him. So I played that one really safe. I just rocked writtens, like just some real general, like apply to any MC, your whack writtens, and got through the round just by out-rhyming, right?
Right.
And then the last round was Lonnie B from the Super Friends. And Lonnie was also on fire all night. Like his rounds were stellar. And he had this ferocious attack flow, right? Man, he came at me. And luckily, like earlier, because when you're backstage, like you're sizing people up, but lyrically, you're sizing them up also. And you're tucking away punchlines if you're a smart fucking battle MC. You're not sitting there looking at these people like, oh, hey, yeah, nice sneakers. No, you're like, how can I flip those sneakers into some shit that's going to make him feel like shit out there on the stage? Like, how can I leverage everything that I'm seeing and observing right now against them later and start formulating punchlines? And I had that Aquaman line on deck because I knew he was down with the Super Friends. And so I was just like formulating the whole night, Super Friends, Aquaman. And the more I saw him rock, the more I was like, man, I got to land that if I got to go up against him because that's the one that's going to get him. And so literally, like the strategy going into it was pre-written filler lines, about 8 to 12 bars worth, before you build like a springboard to then jump into a freestyle with what you've been formulating, and hope you can pull the words together on time with the beat, whatever beat they decide to put on, right? But I was able to land it. And when I landed it, like that was one of the biggest punchlines I think I've ever landed in my life. Like the whole room just lit up. No one even heard the last 4 bars, which at that point, like I got into a zone. It was some really precise freestyle. I can't even remember what it is right now, but I was like gone at that point. But I was able to get through that one. It was a fun night. It's my Uncle Rico tape now.
Nice. Hey, did you ever come cross paths with like a Super Nat?
No, man. We've ciphered together, and I've done some artwork for him, and he is one of the coolest people I know, right? Personally. But I did see him battle like C Rays from our crew back in the days. That was one of the most epic battles I've ever witnessed, as far as like a total freestyle battle.
Okay. And Craig G?
Nah. Craig
not
was
in.
always in a different circuit also, like, or a different battle than I was in. I could have seen that happening, but I was like just behind his wave of the early battle circuit, like the Rap Olympics era. That's back when like Juice was battling with on a team with like Wordsworth and AL and Eminem. So yeah, it was just the wave that was just after that was when I was on. But Craig G was in those earlier waves getting busy.
But a Breeze in his prime against the Craig G at his prime, who wins that battle?
Yeah. That's a good question.
If you could put yourself outside of yourself for a second, who wins that battle?
It depends on the night. Like honestly, like I've had my moments where I've been phenomenal, like incredible with the freestyle, like flawless, right? Like when you're in that zone, like you can find it. And I'm a fucking witty person, and I've chopped down so many fucking MCs that like no one is beyond my reach, honestly.
Okay, we'll take that.
Yeah.
What type of opportunities presented themselves to you after that Blaze battle?
Not as many as I would have expected, but that's when the Detonator Records thing solidified. And dude was like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to put out records. I'm ready to press vinyl. I'm ready to press CDs. I'm ready to hit the road. Let's roll. And I was like, I'm right in that frame of mind also. I'm ready to hit the road. I'm ready to get out there and leverage some of this recognition. And we did it like indie style and just went on the road. And we were able to get a lot of shows as a result of that. But it didn't translate into like anything major, but there was like weird sponsorships. There was like ads for like Miller beer and stuff like that, video game placements. So there was a lot of activity. There was a lot of professional work. But at that point also, like the mainstream industry, there weren't a lot of lanes for what I was bringing. They wanted us to stay in our lane. There was a small valve open for anything that was along the lines of like conscious or alternative. So every now and then they would leak someone out. But they were trying to move in a very different direction at that time. The industry was.
Right. You got with Acrobatic in 2002 for a couple singles. Was it ever in the plan for you guys to do a whole project together?
I'm sure we probably talked about it or had a bunch of ideas along those lines. Like we've rocked enough songs together where we could pretty much call it a project, and things that haven't been released that were done up there in Boston. It was just a good vibe. But I know he was definitely like very much like focused on his solo endeavors, and what I appreciated was seeing like how he curated basically his product, right? His image, everything. He was very much focused on building his brand. And I was able to learn from that, from spending that time up there in Boston and observing that. And that made me more invested in my own personal brand for a while after that.
You released a slew of singles throughout the 2000s. Why did it take so long for 2008 to come for your first full project?
Lack of direction again. It was the same deal, right? Like I just had a lot of talent, but I never had like consistent management. And when I did have managers, like I would make their job so hard. I would always do like extra work or tack on a little extra to something, or like I would never just let them do their job. And it was difficult to work with me being a talent like that. And so that's why a lot of my projects were like all over the place. And I think 2008 probably things started coming together because like in life, things started coming together right around then. My mom passed in 2007.
Sorry to hear that.
Unfortunately, if anybody's part of that club, like, that is one of those moments in your life where things change. And for me, it was like I had to really stop and assess where I was at and where I was investing my energy, and really reapproach how I was doing everything almost. And so it was a rebuilding process for me. And that project was one with one producer who had a vision for what he wanted. And it was easy for me to follow that vision and add my talent to it. And there it was with some direction. And it was probably like one of the most cohesive projects that I'd released up until that time. So much so that we got to see some success from it. Like we invested in some promotions. Like we were on the top of the college charts for weeks on end with that Troublemakers project. The only thing keeping us from the top was Lupe Fiasco at the time. And he had a huge vehicle supporting him, right? So like that was a significant vote of confidence there that there's still something I could contribute to this. But also it gave me the mindset of I should start focusing more on cohesiveness and making projects that make statements, or at least like fit together like a larger statement if possible. But just going with a plan basically was what I was doing after that.
At what point did you meet Dirty Dutch and come up with this idea for this project?
Met him online. Like he was cool enough to he was running like one of the largest podcasts on iTunes at the time, in the early days when podcasts were just starting to blow up. He was on the Indie Feed podcast. He was doing Indie Feed hip hop. He featured one of my songs, and I reached out, and I think we started building after that. And then he was like, "I make beats," and I was like, "I'd love to hear something." And he sent me a beat, and it was awesome. And I started writing, and then we just started going back and forth, like exchanging stuff through the internet. And that was also, I think, the first time that I collaborated online that much. Before then, I was always in person. It was also the first time I'd set up a home studio in my career, which anyone starting up, like, get that out of the way early. That's my advice right now. Get that out of the way early.
Right.
If you can create a space to create, like when on demand, when you want to create, like that's the most beneficial thing for you as a creative person.
Man, so you're talking about MySpace time, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. That's early.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Jeez, yeah. That's when I think a lot of people kind of started connecting and making connections overseas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was an interesting period of time right there.
It changed the game in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
You went on to release Breeze These Trees in 2009. What kind of reception did you get from that?
We got a really warm reception, but we didn't invest in it as much as we could have. We invested in the production and the recording and the materials with the CDs and all that. But we could have invested more into promotions, but we still got landed top 4 multiple times with that release on the college charts, which was really cool. I think we could have worked a single or two off of it. We really didn't like do that much in the way of singles. And then we were just started working with that label at the time. And it was a weird situation with the label. Like we were putting it out, but then it didn't come out. And then after that, I think that was my last time like working with a small indie, because things were becoming just more accessible. And I was like, I could just do it myself. So let me just start doing it myself.
Is that at this point we're starting Evahflowin Enterprises?
Exactly. Yeah, soon afterwards. Everything else, Evahflowin Enterprises. Inspired by Stark Enterprises, my favorite comic book character from when I was a kid, before the MCU movies. Like I used to love drawing Iron Man. Like that, even my friends would know that. Like, if it's Rick, or he's gonna draw some Iron Man something or another. Like I would draw Iron Man all over the place. So Stark Enterprises, Evahflowin Enterprises.
That next year you released As He Goes On. Reception wise, how did that fare?
Um, Again, no promo, and just buzz, and just tried to work it on the internet, like with through the social media channels. Um, and so critically, like please, like it was pleasing. Like people liked it. People liked the pieces on it. They liked the entire project and how it flowed together. A little uncohesive in terms of like the different production that's on it. Like it's a little all over the place with that. But for me at the time, um, that was supposed to be my farewell. So I was kind of gathering together like everything I wanted to put on a project that I just didn't have a place for, and tried to string it together on this project so it would flow together well enough to carry it across. And so I think there were like a few songs that I really wanted to make sure ended up on there. And then for the rest, it was like, okay, cool, let me add these on just so I can say I put them out there. And then I'll peace out and just focus on work and starting a family. And, it's been fun rap. And there was also like a bitterness to it, and a bitterness to me at that time. Like I was upset. Like I was approaching 40. I'd invested all this time and energy into this art and into this craft, and I felt like I deserved something from it. And that was my overall sentiment, also. Right after having gone through that traumatic stuff with my mom, and reflecting on my life and the choices that I had made, and not being serious enough or focused enough. I got to that point in 2010, and I'm just like, man, fuck rap. You didn't give me what I wanted. I'm out. And that's why I took a break for a minute. And that's why there's such a gap between that and the next release.
Right. So that was like an 8-year gap. I believe Fun dropped in 2018. At what point did you decide, hey, I want to get back into this?
My wife at the time, right, had made a comment to me around 2015, 2016. And I don't know what we were fighting about at that time, but it was like, you need to get back into making music. You just need to do something. You're just a happier person when you're doing it. And it was like the light bulb went off because I had shut it down, and I was definitely continuing down that dark direction that I was going in from the time that I was hanging it up. And as soon as I started working it out again, like I started like feeling better, and I started performing better at work also, just keeping the release alive. And then that's when it started reversing as far as my mindset. Instead of like, this thing needing me, like I needed this thing. Like this thing was something that, has always been a place of comfort, a source of release for me throughout my life. It helps me maintain my balance. It's how I focus, right? And so just getting back into it, which was awkward as all get up too, because the Fun album was a mess. But I wanted to say something because I was angry. Brothers was getting killed all over the place those summers. I just wanted to do something to like raise some funds and raise some awareness, and just do what I did. Like I was always a conscious MC. Like anytime something was going down, like I was out there, I was at the events. Or adding a verse onto it, whatever it was. And so Fun was that, let's just try to do something. And it was collaborative. I reached out to a ton of homies. A lot of people came through with verses or beat contributions. So I didn't have to like carry all the writing load, which was already like hard for me to write a verse at that point. But I learned a lot from the process. I learned a lot about mixing from the process also, which was something that I'd been working on earlier, which made me more proficient and able to take on the projects after that.
Right.
Yeah. So, like you just said now, that the writing had became a little hard for you at that point.
Yeah.
During that time that you took off and you were just, concentrating on work, you didn't write at all. Like there was not point in time that you were like, let me just jot some stuff down? Nothing?
There's always a request that's going to come through here or there, right? And it's rare that I turn down a request, because I'm really honored that somebody would even think of me to, like, want to rock with me half the time, right? Like I'm like, I really appreciate, like, oftentimes when the requests come through and they're sincere, right? So I'll try to reciprocate. So maybe it was like a verse or two a year that I would work on, like for somebody when a request would come through. But they would take me like days to write those verses because I was so rusty and out of it, and they weren't that good either, to be honest with you. Now I'm thinking about it, like when you're out of that rhythm, because another thing I was thinking about, because I'm going to see Ron Carter next week at the Blue Note, and I was watching a documentary about it, and it's funny because he's like, he didn't really want to mess with hip hop anymore after his experience, like working with a few hip hoppers. He was like, they don't allow us to do our thing. What's his reason for it? And then with me, with this, it's like throughout the years, it's like I came from an era where having your own unique voice and sound was so important.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of the superhero influence came, and especially with underground hip hop. Like, everybody wanted their own unique power. When you got on the mic, you didn't want anybody to be confused that there was somebody else on there. You want people to know it was you as soon as you got on, right? And you had your own approach, you had your own flow, and you just kept developing it and working it. And so for me, it was like I was still in the process of development and working on the sound that I was trying to get to when I took that break. And so that was the other part that was hard, because like I'm trying to work out like not just the mechanical aspects of it, but also like those aspirational portions of the kind of flows that I was going for from earlier on,
Gotcha.
Over the past recent years, you've worked with a producer by the name of Chrome. How did you guys link up?
Same way, online. Just reached out one day and was like, hey, I've got some beats. I'm working on a song with Vast there. Would you be interested in dropping a verse on it? And I was like, Vast is dope. Hell yeah. Send it my way. And we did this song called The Cry from Within the Earth. And we just kept sending beats back and forth. The thing about Chrome was that was in my early, like, trying to work it out again days also. No, when we first started rocking, it was before then. So I was still loose. I was still getting loose, but his beats were always right in my pocket. Like, MCs have like those beats that just fit in your pocket. Like, as soon as you hear it, like, you can freestyle off of it. You can write a dope song off it. You just know that your verse is going to be dope because of the style of beat it is. And every time he would shoot me a beat, it would be right in the pocket for me. And so that's how we met back in the mid to later 2000s. And then I took my hiatus, and then when I came back into it, like, me and him connected again and started working again.
Very dope. You connected with Dirty Dutch once again last year. How did that conversation come about?
That album we was working on for about 3 years now.
So you never lost contact.
Life just got in the way. Right. That's one of my homies right there. He was one of the groomsmen at my wedding. Like, that's my man right there. And I got so much love for him and his family, right? But we just had a lot on our hands. Like, he got 3 kids, I had a kid, we got houses and mortgages and all this other stuff, and we're trying to do this album. And we really wanted to do it right. Like, we wanted it to sound tight. I know for him, the mixing part was something that he really wanted to put some time into. And I appreciate the fact that he took his time, and then that we pieced it together like little bit by bit. And then as we got closer to the end, we started recording more songs because we got excited because it started coming together. And so, I feel really good about that project right there. Again, we didn't invest, and we didn't put a lot of push behind it. But I think that's my learn from everything over the last few years, getting back into it, is that first get to a place where I feel confident in the material, and now invest in the material and see what comes out of it.
Right. So what? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to ask. So it seems like throughout your career, that's been the same pattern, right? That you've kept finding yourself as far as like the business side, not being the way it should be. So what have you done to prepare for that this time around? What
It's
has changed?
it's goals, right? Like you got to have a goal for what it is that you'd like to achieve. For me, um, it's not necessarily monetary gain in the sense of like I don't want to blow up off of this or get rich. I just would want to break even and get returns on my investments. So for me, it's understanding like, well, how many streams equal what, right? What level of exposure do you need to reach to get to that level? And what are some smart ways to invest to reach that? And then you just assess afterwards and you see, okay, was that worth it after the investment? And if it is good, and if not, then you're like, all right, maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board. But you don't stop the process because the process still supports your healing. It supports your mindset. And a lot of what I do and the way that I approach it, it's so personal that it may only resonate with a few people, but it resonates deeply. And I've had more than enough personal accounts of how it supported people through really tough times in their life. So that makes it all worthwhile in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I also realize I can't put too much of an investment in it where it puts me or my livelihood or my family in any kind of a predicament either. So I don't really spend my money on a lot of other things. I don't go out and party too much. I don't go out drinking a lot. Like I don't have 20 sneakers in my closet. Like I'm a real simple dude. So to put a little bit behind this and see what comes back, like I think it'd be worthwhile, especially if the people are feeling it.
And you're doing everything yourself? Do you have a little team together? How's that going?
Well, that's the other thing too. At this point, like I've been a manager in my profession for over 10 years, right? So it's a small like self-operated business. Like I've got all the digital outlets now and tools that help me manage things. And then it's just outsourcing for other parts of the job where I work with partnerships. Like
Okay.
Jerry Graham was a good connect to gain some exposure and get on some platforms, right? Like and so we'll keep building those kind of connections right there to outsource other parts of the work. But I feel pretty confident that I can just manage it slowly. The live venue and the live aspect, I think, is the part now that I need to consider as far as how to approach that, because it'll be kind of hard to take that much time off to really pursue a live career. But after the last few years, like, is that even necessary anymore? Is the other thing that I'm assessing. So
Like
still learning.
doing
Yeah.
shows and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, people are still doing a lot of like virtual / live
Mm-hmm.
like options, and it's working, right? There's still like traction that can be gained in this space as well as the live venue. So I'm gonna pay attention, but I don't know if I'm gonna invest as much there,
Okay.
just because of what it would take me away from.
Gotcha. Sounds dope.
The new single is out today. Take us back behind the concept of the idiotic.
This is an awesome story. My homie Monty Smith, street poet Monty Smith, who I used to rock with back in North Carolina. I got hooked up with him through another homie, the Mad Rabbi, right? We had collaborated together on this song called The Patriot way back when, right? We was dropping some political bombs on that one, and Monty was like this raw street poet from down there. Either way, he came by the crib one day to help me out with a song when I lived in North Carolina for a little bit back in 2007. And I hit him off with some CDs of some stuff I was working on. He said he wore those CDs out in the car with his little son, and they used to play the CDs over and over and over again. And then he reached out to me and he said, the kid's making beats. And he grew up listening to you, and he'd be honored if you took a listen and saw what it is. And I was like, okay, cool. So he sent me the beats, and I was like, this beat is dope. I was like, man, if he's inspired by the stuff from my era and 21 doing stuff like this, like let's go, let's make it happen. And I started writing like within 24 hours. I had my verse, and then I was thinking like, who could add on, because it was just going to be one verse and that's it. But it was only like a minute and change, and I was like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, I gotta have somebody else on this, and I remembered I was thinking of asking Zoo to jump on a song for a long time already. I just didn't have the song yet. And when I thought about who else I'd want to hear on this, I'm such a fan of his flow that I just wanted to hear him on this beat. And so I just sent to him and it was like, whatever you want to do, just cover the entire segment, but do whatever you want. And he hit me with a verse that I'm a fan of, which is awesome. Because I love listening to this jam, so I could listen to Zoo's verse. It's so dope, like so dope. And then it was so timely that now with full control, I could be like, well, I want to put it out. You know, I don't want to wait until summer when people are like, Mandalorian, what? Boba Fett, what? Like, no, like those parts of the verse are so timely and so poignant. I'm like, we got to get this out. And so I set a timeline, communicated my needs to the promotion teams, and figured out the budgets. And I do all my artwork in-house because I'm a trained illustrator and graphic designer, so I don't need to outsource that. And boom, within weeks, it's on the timeline, it's released, and we're here talking about it. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Nice.
It's still early on. What kind of reception has you received so far?
Just a lot of props, man. People are really excited. A lot of shares on IG and whatnot. You know, like I got texted by my man. It's like, I played it 3 times today already, and I was like, yo, this is dope. And that's what it is. Like I think we are like from the essence kind of hip hoppers, and Monty's Kid is coming up the same way, and I love that there's this whole wave of 20 something who are going back and finding like some value in some of what we were doing in that era with those muddy beats, but they're using like new technology to kind of sift through it, and they're experimenting with sampling, but using some of these new tools, and it's awesome. But they're also approaching it with respect.
Right.
Respect for those who did it before them. And I think there's room for more cross collaboration like that. Because as I think about like Ron Carter and like the work that they've done as jazz players, like, you know, for them, it was, it didn't matter the ages or what it was. It was just about like everybody had their own sound, and it was how those sounds collaborated with one another that made some amazing music happen. I feel like there's a lot of room for that in hip hop, and there's still a lot of craftsmen from that era who are still active to this day, who still have very distinct voices, who've advanced their craft. That would make for some really great collaborations going forward. And I hope they all keep doing it. I plan to keep doing it. And hopefully I'll collaborate with some of them more along the way.
Me and Uncle E absolutely loved the single. Took us back to a 93 Black Moon feeling. Like I said, it's out now. Any plans for a whole project after this single?
Yeah, me and the kid are definitely going to keep working. We got a couple other songs recorded. There may be an overseas release for that, so we're gonna more to come on that. I think the next thing on deck right now for me is in the next month. Chrome and I are revisiting our Old Man Spring album. Chrome's gone back and remixed all of the tracks, cleaned up all of the mixes. We're going to add some new material to it, and so we'll have a single in about a month that we'll be promoting off of that. That if people appreciate the vibe of this one, they're going to absolutely love the vibe on this next project with Chrome. It's he outdid himself on this one. It is absolutely amazing.
So, before we go, I want to ask you a question. Early on, you mentioned being around some pioneers, some legends. You're working with some young people this time around. Hip hop is going to be turning 50 pretty soon. What are your thoughts and take on that?
I think it's awesome, and I think it's time for you know, I like I've said, I've been advocating for more lanes, right? And you can't like falsely manufacture those things, but there does need to be some kind of a vehicle to provide exposure for more of the span, the breadth of hip hop. There's too many pioneers that have been left way back in the past who may not have been able to figure out how to maneuver some of the new opportunities that are available or new ways to get exposure, right? A lot of them aren't doing so well either that help build this culture up. but at the very least, like they should receive the exposure, the recognition that they deserve for what they've done. Like I'm glad the Hip Hop Museum is coming together, and I know that's going to be a big part of building that exposure and giving them the props and the flowers that they deserve. But I think that number 50 is really significant, helping people open up to see, okay, how many people have been left out there, and then start encouraging and embracing some of those pioneers to be more active. To have their voices get out there more, to collaborate more with some of the younger folks, because they still have so much to offer, and the way that they perfected their craft at that time, like even the power of the control of the words and the cadence, like, you know, like people think like rapping like this is so easy. Anybody can do it like you can see, but you gotta hold your voice in a certain tone when you're rocking on top of the microphone. Like this ain't easy. Like my throat hurts right now. But like that was like, yo, you had these shitty mics and you had to like really control your voice to like hit this, and you had to hit this rhythm. Like that's the kind of shit that I think like when you start looking at it differently, there's a lot of dope shit that still needs to be like exposed and revered on a different level. And I hopefully like this anniversary will make that happen.
Very dope, very dope. I agree with you 100%, man. Sincere, anything else before we go?
Yeah, any other avenues outside of music Breez is looking to pursue or in the future?
I think I just keep making music. I want to keep doing art too. Like I've got a dream. Bucket list is I got to do a full-on comic book myself, not just the backgrounds.
That would be dope.
Not start a comic book and not finish, which has been the bane of my professional art existence. I've started 10 different comic books. I got as far as like 18 pages on one. I've got to finish a comic book. That's I think as far as like professional art pursuits, like that's one right there, man. If we connect again, like hold me accountable. Like bring that up.
Absolutely.
Like, we will.
Remember we talked about that comic book, man? Like please, because I need some pressure on this one. I gotta make it happen.
Absolutely. We're the pressure guys. Before we get out of here, can you tell the people where they can keep up with you, social media, moving forward in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the tag on the screen is the best part, like the Instagram right there. Like that's the way to definitely connect right there and see what's up. Outside of that, like it's like I don't really use the Facebook too much. But this IG, man. I don't TikTok. I'm sorry. Yeah. And
TikTok, man. Yeah, listen, bro. You gotta get on. You don't have to dance.
I know.
There's an audience on TikTok for us older cats, man. You know?
That's what's up. All right, I'll take the plunge eventually, right? But for now, like everything's IG. Like Instagram's the best way to interact and engage with me, and definitely appreciate every time I do get to connect with the people on there.
Absolutely. Thank you for everything you've done for the culture. Thank you for joining us this evening. The Idiotic is out now. Can you tell the people where they can find that at?
Pretty much any streaming platform, like Tidal, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, the Googles. Like it's all on there on the YouTube. Did a little goofy animation video on the YouTube. Also, if you get a chance to look at the dancing bean bags, it's also on the Instagram. But yeah, it's out there, and thank everyone who's played it so far. Thank you for everybody who shared it and everybody who may check it out after this. And definitely thank y'all for having me, man. I really appreciate this.
Absolutely. Big shout out to Jerry Graham for connecting us. And thank you for everything. Like I said, you've done for the culture. We'll see you again very soon. And you better have that comic book ready for us.
I got you, man.
All right.
Trust me, we're going to be asking. Yo, thank you, man. Appreciate the time, bro.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all too. Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Salute.
Okay.